It had been a long time since I'd done something just for myself. It was easy to get lost in the routine: work, home, dinner, sleep. The days blurred together, and I found myself feeling like a spectator in my own life. I loved David, truly. He was a good man, a reliable husband. But lately something had been missing. Not in him, but in me. It felt like I'd slipped into a quiet, unremarkable version of myself. It wasn't his fault. He had always been the steady one in our relationship, while I had become the background. That changed when I saw the dress. I wasn't looking for anything when I stepped into the boutique. But there it was, hanging on a mannequin by the door. A sleek red dress that seemed to shimmer under the store lights. It called to me, in a way I couldn't explain. I reached out to touch the fabric, letting it slip between my fingers. Imagining how it would feel against my skin, the sales associate, a young woman with platinum blonde hair, noticed me eyeing it. "I think that would look amazing on you," she said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. I smiled, trying not to seem too eager. But I knew she was right. It would look amazing. It felt like the dress was meant for me, for the person I used to be, the one who didn't settle for quiet, safe, and routine. When I tried it on, it fit perfectly. It hugged my curves just right, not too tight but enough to make me feel noticed. The deep red was bold but elegant, and as I looked at myself in the mirror, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't vanity, not exactly. It was a kind of recognition, a reawakening of something that had been dormant for too long. I bought the dress without a second thought, and that night, I wore it. Claire had called me earlier in the day. "We need to go out. No excuses. It's been way too long since we did something fun." She was always the one who pushed me, the friend who lived for spontaneity, for adventure. I had been tempted to decline, to stay home and enjoy the quiet. But the dress felt like a sign, like I was being pulled out of the fog. I agreed to go. By the time Claire picked me up, the sun had just set. The city lights were starting to twinkle as we headed downtown. The night was still young, and I could already feel the excitement building. We were going to a new club, one that had just opened, with a reputation for being exclusive. I had no idea what to expect, but I could feel that this was exactly the kind of night I needed. When we arrived, the line was long, but the bouncer waved us in when he saw Claire. "VIP," he asked, checking his list. "Always," Claire replied with a grin, linking her arm through mine and pulling me forward. As we entered the club, the bass thumped in my chest, vibrating through my whole body. The lights were dim, but the atmosphere was electric. People were already dancing, laughing, and sipping cocktails. The place felt alive, like every inch of it was pulsing with energy. It was the kind of place where no one cared who you were or where you came from. It was just about being here right now. I hadn't realized how much I needed that kind of release until I stepped inside. I had been so consumed with being the perfect wife, the responsible woman, the one who always followed the rules. But in that moment, none of that mattered. I was just a woman in a red dress, ready to enjoy the night. Claire was already leading the way to the bar, ordering us drinks. She handed me a martini, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "To you," she said, lifting her glass. "Tonight, you're not just a wife, you're you." I smiled, clinking my glass against hers. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of something other than routine. We were standing by the bar when I noticed him. At first, it was just a glance, nothing overt, nothing that made me feel like I was doing something wrong. But then I realized he was looking at me, too. Really looking. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with short, dark hair and a confident smile. He wasn't like the other guys in the club, who were either too eager or too drunk. No, this guy had a calm, collected air about him, the kind of presence that commanded attention without even trying. He smiled at me, a slow, deliberate smile, and then, almost as if he had been waiting for the moment, he walked over. "Hey," he said, his voice deep, with just a hint of a smirk. "I couldn't help but notice you from across the room. You look stunning." His words were smooth, but they didn't feel rehearsed. They felt genuine, and for some reason, that made my heart race a little faster. "Thank you," I replied, feeling the warmth of the compliment linger in my chest. "I'm just here to have a good time." He nodded, stepping a little closer. "Well, I'm glad to see someone else who's here for the right reasons. I'm Ben, by the way." I told him my name, and we exchanged small talk for a few minutes. But there was an unspoken connection there. Something I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't love at first sight. Nothing that dramatic. But there was something magnetic about him, something that made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Claire, ever the social butterfly, had already made her way to the dance floor. I looked over at her, then back at Ben. Without thinking, I decided to join her. Ben seemed to sense my hesitation. "Don't let me keep you from having fun," he said, his voice low and smooth. "But, if you're up for it, I'd love to see you dance." The way he said it made my stomach flip. It wasn't just a casual comment. It felt like an invitation. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to take that step, to let go of the careful control I had held onto for so long. I gave him a quick smile. "Maybe later," I said, turning toward the dance floor. But as I walked away, I couldn't help but glance back at him, just once. He was still watching me, his smile lingering like a promise. I wasn't thinking about Ben when I was dancing. Well, I was, but only in a vague, distant way. The music, the flashing lights, and the pulsating rhythm had a way of consuming me. Claire was right beside me, her laughter rising above the beat, her arms flung wide as she twirled in circles. It was contagious, and for the first time in what felt like years, I let myself get lost in the moment. But even in the midst of it all, Ben's eyes kept creeping back into my mind. It was the way he looked at me, intense but not overwhelming, like he could see parts of me I had buried long ago. I had no intention of letting anything happen, but the way he made me feel, seen, desired, it was new. The kind of new that made me question why I hadn't felt that way in so long. After a few songs, Claire grabbed my wrist and pulled me off the floor. "You okay?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. She could always tell when something was off, even if I didn't say a word. "I'm fine," I said, trying to shake it off with a smile. "Just enjoying the night." "Yeah, you are," she said, raising an eyebrow. "But, I saw that guy. Ben, right? He's been eyeing you since we walked in." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "I noticed," I muttered, trying to sound casual. "He's just being friendly." Claire wasn't convinced. "Friendly. Girl, that guy is into you. And you're into him too. Don't lie." I bit my lip, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't wrong. There was something between us, something undeniable. I hadn't felt a spark like that in a long time. Not since the early days of my relationship with David. But the thought of acting on it felt wrong. I was married. I had a life with David. But I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe this was just something I needed. Something I deserved. I wasn't asking for anything serious. It wasn't like I was planning to leave David, but maybe a night out, a harmless flirtation, wouldn't be the end of the world, right? "I'm not doing anything," I said, trying to reassure Claire and myself. "I'm just having fun." But Claire didn't look convinced. She gave me a knowing smile. "You know, if you want to talk about it later, I'm here. Just don't do anything you'll regret." Before I could respond, Claire was already off again, heading toward the bar. I watched her for a moment, the sound of her laughter echoing in my ears. I had always admired her confidence, her ability to just be, to do what she wanted without guessing herself. I, on the other hand, always guessed myself. I questioned every decision I made, worried about how it would affect those around me. And that was what kept me tethered to David. My love for him was steady, dependable, but it had become comfortable, predictable. And lately that comfort felt more like a cage than a refuge. I turned back to Ben, who had stepped closer while I was distracted. He was leaning against the bar, his drink in hand, his eyes never leaving me. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice soft but with a note of concern. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just needed a break from the dance floor." He nodded. "I get that. The music here is intense. I think it's nice, though, when people don't feel like they have to keep up with it. Sometimes it's better to just be." His words struck me, though I wasn't sure why. I wanted to tell him I was fine, that I wasn't the kind of person who got swept away by things. But the truth was, I was being swept away. It had started with the dress, the music, the way the night felt alive. And then it was Ben, looking at me like I was someone worth noticing. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I don't usually do this," I admitted, not even sure what I meant by that. Go out, I mean. Or get distracted. Ben raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Distracted. You mean by me? His voice was teasing. But there was a hint of something else underneath. Something deeper, like he wasn't just flirting for the sake of it. He was trying to figure me out. I laughed, though it felt forced. Maybe. I said, my voice quieter now. It's just been a while since I felt seen. There. I said it. The truth, or at least part of it. I didn't expect him to understand, but the look in his eyes made me feel like he did. He didn't laugh or brush it off. Instead, he leaned a little closer, his hand brushing against mine on the bar. You deserve to be seen, he said softly. Everyone does. I couldn't tell if it was the alcohol or the situation, but I felt a warmth spread through me. His touch lingered, and for a second, it was like the world around us disappeared. It was just the two of us, locked in a moment that I didn't want to end. But then, I remembered David. I thought of his face, of the way he would be sitting at home, probably watching TV or reading a book, completely unaware of where I was or what was happening. He trusted me. I had to remember that. I couldn't just throw it all away for the rush of this moment. But what if I didn't have to throw it away? What if I could enjoy the attention without it meaning anything? I could go home, kiss David goodnight, and pretend nothing had happened. It wasn't like I was doing anything wrong, right? Ben leaned in just a little more, his voice a soft whisper. I don't mean to rush you, but I'd love to see you again. Maybe we could grab dinner sometime. His words felt like an invitation, but also a test. It was as if he was waiting for me to make the choice. Whether I was the kind of woman who could enjoy a fleeting connection without it meaning anything, or whether I would go back to the predictable life I had been living. I hesitated. My heart raced in my chest, and my mind whirled with conflicting thoughts. I thought of David again, his warmth, his gentleness. But I also thought of the desire that had been ignited in me, the spark that hadn't been there in so long. I met Ben's gaze, searching his face for any sign of what he really wanted. And then, before I could second-guess myself, I said the words that would change everything. I think I'd like that. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The days after the night at the club were a blur. I went through the motions. Work, home, dinner, sleep. But all I could think about was that moment. Ben's eyes, the way he looked at me with such intensity. His words that lingered in the air like a promise. I had agreed to meet him again. And now I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I didn't tell David about the night out. It seemed like a small thing, really. I had been out with Claire, I had danced, I had met a guy. None of it meant anything, right? But I knew that if I told him, it would change everything. I didn't want to hurt him, and I certainly didn't want to admit to myself that I had allowed myself to be swept up in something so daring. The text from Ben came the next afternoon. Dinner tomorrow night. I know a place you'd love. It was simple, casual, but it hit me like a wave. I had told myself I wouldn't follow through, that I wasn't the type of woman who stepped outside the lines, but deep down I was already making excuses in my head. I was just going to have dinner with him, talk, laugh, and then go home. I could control it. I could keep it casual. It wasn't like I was doing anything serious. The evening of our dinner date, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting my outfit for the third time. The dress wasn't as bold as the one from the club, but it was still a choice I wouldn't normally make. Fitted black, with a deep neckline that made my heart race every time I looked at myself in it. It felt like a rebellion. I had no idea why I was doing this, but as I put on my shoes and fixed my hair, I couldn't help but feel a thrill. David was on the couch, flipping through channels. He barely looked up when I walked past him. His head was buried in the TV, his attention consumed by whatever show had captured his focus. "Where are you going?" he asked absently, as I grabbed my bag from the hallway. "I'm meeting a friend for dinner," I said, my voice a little too light, a little too casual. "I'll be back soon." He nodded, his gaze not leaving the screen. "Okay, have fun." I felt a pang of guilt. But I didn't let it stop me. I stepped out, and as the door clicked shut behind me, I took a deep breath, trying to steady the butterflies in my stomach. When I arrived at the restaurant, Ben was already there, waiting outside, looking effortlessly handsome in a dark jacket and jeans. He looked up when I approached, and his smile was instant, warm, welcoming. "Hey," he greeted me, his voice smooth, almost like he had been expecting me. "You look incredible." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the knot that had formed in my stomach. "Thanks. You don't look so bad yourself." We sat down, and the conversation flowed easily. It was easy to talk to him. He had a way of making everything feel natural, like we had known each other much longer than just a few hours. He asked me about work, about my family, and I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't in a long time. "How's your husband?" he asked casually as we dug into our entries. The question hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't prepared to have David's name spoken like that, especially in the context of this new thing that was blossoming between me and Ben. I hesitated for a moment, choosing my words carefully. "He's good," I said, forcing a smile. "A great guy, steady, reliable." Ben watched me, his eyes narrowing just slightly, as if he was studying me. "You don't sound convinced." I blinked, surprised by the honesty in his voice. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, a small smirk playing on his lips. "I don't know. You're here with me tonight, but you don't seem like you're fully here. It's like you're somewhere else, like you're waiting for something." I was taken aback. "I don't know what you mean," I said quickly, but I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. "Look," he said, leaning forward slightly, his voice soft but insistent. "I don't want to pressure you, but it's clear there's something between us. I'm not blind, and I'm not asking you to make any decisions right now, but I think you should stop pretending you don't feel it." His words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. How could he see right through me like that? How could he read me so easily? I opened my mouth to say something, anything, to deny it. But the truth was, he was right. There was something between us. Something I didn't understand but couldn't deny. Before I could respond, he reached across the table, placing his hand on mine. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a spark had been lit in the space between us. "I'm not trying to make you feel guilty," he said, his voice low. "But I want to know if you're really happy. If you're really happy with him, then I'll step back. But if you're not, if something is missing, I'm here." I looked at his hand on mine, the warmth of it spreading through me. I didn't know what I was supposed to say. How could I tell him the truth? How could I admit to him that something was missing, that I had been craving something more, something that David no longer gave me? I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think I'm just confused." Ben squeezed my hand, his thumb brushing over my skin. "You don't have to know everything right now, but I think it's important to ask yourself, what do you really want?" I could feel the weight of his question pressing down on me. What did I want? I had spent so long trying to please everyone else. David, my family, my friends, that I hadn't stopped to ask myself that question. And now, sitting across from Ben, I realized how much I had been denying myself, denying my own desires, my own needs. It wasn't just about him. It was about me, about who I was when I wasn't trying to be everything to everyone else. I pulled my hand back gently, as if his touch had somehow shaken something loose inside me. "I don't know if I'm ready to figure that out yet," I said, looking away. I wasn't sure what I was even saying anymore, but I couldn't look him in the eye. Not now. Not with everything swirling inside me. But Ben didn't push. He just nodded, his eyes still soft, understanding. "Take your time," he said, his voice steady. "But just know, whatever you decide, I'm not going anywhere." The days after my night with Ben blurred together, in a haze of guilt and exhilaration. I couldn't stop thinking about him, the way he made me feel alive. Like I was someone more than the woman who cooked dinner and wore comfortable sweaters and kept up with the laundry. Ben had reminded me of who I was before life had happened, before marriage, before the weight of responsibility took away all the excitement. But David was still there, still trusting, still unaware of the storm that had begun to gather around us. He'd been so kind lately, too. He had no idea that I was slipping away from him piece by piece. I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want to destroy the life we had built together, even though deep down I knew that what I was doing was already destroying it. Every time I looked at him, I saw someone who still believed in us, in the future we were supposed to have. And yet, every time I was alone with my thoughts, the pull of Ben's attention, the way he made me feel seen, felt like something I couldn't let go of. The text from Ben came again on Thursday. Want to meet up tonight? I looked at my phone, my heart racing. I wanted to say yes, to go to him, to feel that rush again. But I knew I couldn't keep lying, not like this. It wasn't fair to David, and it wasn't fair to myself. I glanced across the living room where David was sitting, reading a book. He was so content in his little world, and it hurt. The guilt gnawed at me like a persistent ache. I'm meeting Claire, I said suddenly, my voice shaky as I stood from the couch. David barely looked up, his focus still on the pages in front of him. Okay, he murmured. Have fun. I didn't know why he even bothered with the lie. It didn't matter. The truth was there, always lurking beneath the surface. I left the house, but my mind wasn't on Claire. It was on Ben. The following week was the moment everything changed. David had been acting different lately. Quiet, distant, like he could sense something was wrong. He'd asked me a few times if I was okay, if everything was fine between us. But I'd brushed him off, telling him I was just tired, that work had been stressful. I thought I was getting away with it, but I wasn't. It happened on a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from work, still wearing the same black dress I had worn to meet Ben the week before. I hadn't planned on seeing him that night, but the pull was too strong, and David was out with friends. He'd told me earlier in the day he would be home late, and I had believed him. He wouldn't come home early. Not this time. I didn't even hear him come in. The sound of the door opening caught me off guard, and for a moment I froze, a sick feeling spreading in my stomach. I heard his footsteps in the hall, slow and heavy, then the soft sound of his voice. Where were you tonight? I turned to face him, my heart racing. David stood in the doorway, his eyes searching mine. There was a strange tension in the air, an unspoken question hanging between us. I told you I was meeting Claire, I said, my voice suddenly shaky. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked toward me, slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. And then his words came out, low and calm, but heavy with something I couldn't name. I know you weren't with Claire. I felt my breath catch in my throat. What do you mean? I asked, my voice coming out too high, too forced. Of course I was. No, he interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. I know about him, Lily. I froze. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might burst. For a moment, the world stood still. I didn't know how to react. It was as though time had slipped away from me, and in that moment, the truth was inescapable. I had been caught. I wanted to say something, anything to deny it, to explain myself, but there was nothing left to say. His eyes were filled with a hurt I had never seen before. They weren't angry. No. They were disappointed. I went through your phone, David continued, his voice barely above a whisper, like he was trying to control the tremor in it. I saw the messages. I know who he is. I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin, but I didn't know what to say. The room felt suffocating, and I struggled to find the words, but they wouldn't come. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I didn't even know if I was ready to face the truth, let alone say it aloud. David shook his head, stepping back as if I had physically pushed him away. I trusted you, Lily. We trusted each other, but this is a betrayal I don't know how to come back from. The finality in his voice hit me like a punch to the stomach. It was the tone of someone who had given up, someone who had already accepted that there was no way back from what had happened. I didn't mean for this to happen. I said weakly, my voice trembling. It just did. I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't want to hurt you. I know, he said quietly, his voice breaking as he looked away. But you did. He didn't raise his voice, didn't shout. He didn't even argue. Instead, he stood there, the weight of the words hanging in the silence between us. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he turned and walked away. The door slammed shut behind him, and in that moment, I felt my entire world crumble. The weight of everything I had done, the lies, the betrayal, the choices I had made, came crashing down all at once. I didn't know where to go, what to do. I had destroyed the one thing that had ever felt real. I stood there for what felt like hours, my mind spinning, my heart torn. And I realized, as I looked around our quiet home, that everything I thought I wanted was empty. The exhilaration of being wanted by someone else, the escape from routine, had only led me to the most painful place. I could imagine the wreckage of the life I had once believed in. The silence in the house felt suffocating now, like it was echoing with the absence of the love I had taken for granted. I had crossed a line, and now there was no going back.